Welcome to Anglophone literature. In this session, we will discover about the medieval age within the year 1066 to 1500. This presentation will be done by Angela and Juan David. First off, we have to know about the significant events that led to all of these extraordinary circumstances or changes that we can find among this period of time. One of them is the Norman conquest, in which William the Conqueror began in 1060 six invasion on Normandy. He defeated King Harold II of England at the Battle of Hastings. For that reason, the Norman conquest has a significant impact all around England, and that is because back in that year, the people used to write or express the literature in English. However, thanks to this, the Norman conquest started to populate the idea that poems and literature as a whole should be only implemented, um, whether in Latin or French language. So for that reason, in the following years and centuries, this caused a huge impact about how English was considered a peasant language instead of, um, um, let's say, a standard or a luxury language that we could use to express or implement ideas or thoughts. We can also find the Magna Carta that was done in 1215, and this was done as a way to implement certain changes or limitations that made the king as the prime hierarchy of all the country. This was because the religion and the church started to have power, and with power, they began to, let's say, diminish the way that the kings were portrayed and should have all the power only for them. So, for that reason, the Magna Carta was done um, with the objective or the idea that a king should have limitations. In despite of that, the king could have um, a plethora of power that could literally have, let's say, difficulties or um, aspects that they will not be followed by the church. In addition to that, we also have the Hundred Years' War, which was a conflict between England and France. This was done because both of those countries wanted to have a huge impact on power, and with power comes the fight for a better future for their respective regions. That led to the circumstance of developing stronger national identities, leading to increased rivalry and conflict over each nation for maintaining their pride and sovereignty. Also, this was done because the English kings held significant territories in France, um, and wanted to expand their influence. Obviously, this was not something quite appealing to the French throne, and this motivated to a desire of stop controlling or stop expanding this idea that had the English kings about France and their fight to assert or to control these lands. As we have mentioned before, the influence of the Norman conquest was quite impactful about how certain ideas should be followed or should be maintained with the following centuries. This was because one of the main aspects that prevailed in the Norman conquest was that English could not be implemented as a language of wisdom or knowledge. So, for that reason, this language was um, quite perished to the point where it was considered a peasant language or a poor language that shouldn't be useful for the brightest um, ideas or to express the art that could be considered on that frame time. For that reason, French and Latin prevailed on this era as the most important, despite of English. Also, the influence of religious literature was quite impactful, and this was caused to the massive expansion that the church, both Christian or Catholic, have been implemented in England. And with that being said, most of the literature work arts or books or novels or poems were inspired by religious features. This is something that we will discover in the following session of this presentation. Also, there was the emergence of the English epic and narrative poetry, where chivalry, honor, bravery were maintained as the main focus for several artists that wanted to express histories about adventure, epic discoveries, and of course the seek of bravery. This was mainly done due to the Arthurian novels or books that several writers wanted to recreate or wanted to express within these centuries.
Moving forward, we are going to talk about literary features of the Middle Ages. Now, I've chosen four specific areas to speak on. The first one is literary devices. Then we have themes and motifs, and characterization, and finally, popular genres. So, first, we're going to talk about literary devices. Common literary devices found in the literature of the Middle Ages are the allegory, symbolism, imagery, irony, and alliteration. Now, what do each one of these actual devices mean? Well, an allegory is a literary device found in many different types of literature, but specifically this one. And it involves using characters or objects to represent abstract concepts or ideas. So let's say representing in the Pierce Plowman, the central character is Pierce. He represents the ideal Christian everyday man. The next one, which is kind of similar to that allegory, we have symbolism. and it involves using an object, word, and or phrase to represent a deeper meaning or concept, which my partner will continue to elaborate more on when he speaks about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Next, we have the imagery. Imagery is also significant. It's when authors use really vivid and specific descriptions of sight, sounds, textures to enrich the reader's senses. Sorry, and that way they get so much more involved in the literature and what they're actually reading about. Another thing that ties very deeply to it is the huge component which was orality during this period of time in terms of literature. So using so much imagery allowed middle-aged literature to have the impact that it did. Then we have irony. Obviously, is when you use language that conveys something that is the opposite of what you're trying to say. And this is at times used as what one could consider comedic relief or to be humorous. And finally, you would find alliteration. This is very common in medieval literature, and it involves using repetitions of sounds, usually at the beginning of words, to create a rhythmic effect when you're speaking. So, super important as well is that medieval literature contained a lot of epic and heroic elements, and specifically the epic type poems, and the alliteration was a key component in those poems. Now, moving forward to themes and motifs, in our presentation, I added chivalry, courtly love, quest, religion, and or faith, good versus evil, epic, like I mentioned before, and morality. So chivalry, I'm sure of you have heard of chivalry isn't dead. So chivalry is a code of honor which knights would follow, and it is a common theme seen throughout medieval literature where knights are constantly going on a quest or giving their life to chivalry and being chivalrous. So that was super important and a key theme in medieval literature. Next is courtly love, tying on to chivalry. Chivalry is often seen as a romantic type of theme, just because, like I said previously, the concept of chivalry isn't dead, is used to describe a man who is like a gentleman or acts as a knight would with a code of honor. So that is also really important in medieval literature. Not finally. Next, we have the quest. Again, knights going on a quest to continue their quest for honor, chivalry, fight for good, and fight against evil. And often these quests tie into I also spoke on, which is the epic. These quests weren't something like short, they were huge, and they were very important quests that they would go on, making them epic. Next, we have religion and or faith. During this period of time, it was really important, and it is a very strong theme that is seen throughout all medieval literature. Next, we're going to talk about good versus evil. Like I mentioned in the quest, it is also represented in a quest or an epic type of essence in the medieval literature that we can see. And morality also ties into that. Next is characterization. Medieval literature had a very unique way of portraying characters. So let's say knights were often depicted as chivalrous and honorable, embodying the virtues of bravery, loyalty, and courtesy. Female characters were obviously typically portrayed as pure, virtuous, and being there to aid the love interest, which was the knight most of the time, and be kind of like their center to earth or a moral compass, as you will. This was very set in stone, these types of stereotypes, you could say, for characterization. And they would portray or represent the morals and ideals of what a person should be during this time period. Finally, we have popular genres. So the three top that are very important during medieval literature are romance, epic poetry, morality, and morality plays. So romance tying back into the knights, chivalry, courtly love, and the characterization of the characters in themselves. It was a very important, very prominent type of genre seen in medieval literature. Epic poetry, again tying back into chivalry, quest, religion, good versus faith, the epic, and morality. So these were, like I mentioned, poetry also using alliteration, symbolism, and imagery. And finally, morality plays. Like I said previously, morality and the ideals that people had during this in the society at this time, they were very clearly portrayed in the literature. Now, my partner is going to talk a little bit more about the Green Knight and different works of literature throughout this period. All right, now finally moving on to authors, I have chosen three to talk about. First, we have William Langland. He was born in 1330 and died in 1400. He is considered to be one of the greatest poets of Middle English, alliterative poetry. He wrote Piers Plowman, and he uses a lot of colloquialism, and he has a very good dominion over the usage of imagery and alliteration. Additionally to this, he used the complexity of many themes such as do well, do best, and was really all of his works had to do with religion, and they encompassed that the religion and the beliefs of that time. Next, we have Margery Kempe. She was an author, a British author. She was born in 1373 and she died in 1440. She was considered a religious mystic, and her autobiography is considered one of the first examples of English autobiographies in the world, in English literature per se. She did a series of pilgrimages between in 1414 to Jerusalem, Rome, Germany, and Spain. Many of the way that a lot of times she's depicted as a crying, weeping woman. She had visions of horrible demons spouting fire in earth. So she wrote a lot about religion and mysticism, and really did a good job in expressing the themes using imagery to make everything very, very realistic. Next, and finally, we have Marie de France. Marie de France was born in 1160 and passed away in 1215. She was a multilingual poet, and she's considered the first female French poet, and she was highly influential during this period. She is considered the mother, or is credited with the birth of the genre of chivalric literature. And like we mentioned before, chivalry was a predominant theme throughout this period. She wrote many works, such as the Arthurian Legend, which is a short poem, and the Breton Lies is also a short poem, and Aesop Fables, and it's a translation from Middle English to French and other fables. So those were three very important authors, and as my partner already spoke about, there were many more, but mainly they all stayed within the confines of the literary features that we spoke about previously and the general context which my partner also talked about.
With that being said, we can follow with one of the prime, or also one of the best portrayed work arts that we can find within these centuries, and is The Green Knight, written by an anonymous writer who goes by the name of Per Poet or Gawain Poet. This history has several characterizations that can be portrayed about the time of medieval knights, knightly courtesy, chivalry, and also honor. This was done because the main aspect about this history is to portray the brave feelings that a knight, and most significantly a knight from the Round Table of King Arthur, should implement and have and also express to their surroundings. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a late 14th century Middle English chivalric romance that tells us the story of Sir Gawain, a knight of King Arthur's Round Table. In a nutshell, the Green Knight is the story of Sir Gawain, one of King Arthur's knights, who accepts a challenge from a mysterious Green Knight. The Green Knight proposes a game. He will allow Gawain to strike him with an axe, provided that Gawain agrees to receive a similar blow in a year and a day. Gawain beheads the Green Knight, but the Green Knight picks up his own head and reminds Gawain of their agreement. As the year progresses, Gawain embarks on a quest to find the Green Knight and fulfill his end to the bargain. Along the way, he encounters various challenges and tests of his honor and virtue, ultimately revealing deeper themes of bravery, honesty, and the nature of true knighthood. The poem is notable for its rich symbolism, intricate language, and exploration of the ideals of chivalry. There is a plethora of key literary aspects seen in The Green Knight. One of them is the chivalry romance, that focuses on themes related to bravery, honor, and chivalry features. This is mainly expressed due that Sir Gawain is an aspirant to become one of the best knights that the King Arthur has ever had. And for that reason, he wants to express that sense of chivalry with his actions, with the way that he wants us to show that he has no fear, that he is brave, and that he has courage and determination to overcome each circumstance or obstacle that can find along his path. Also, we have the Christian allegory, because it addresses the themes of sin, redemption, and fallibility of mankind. Also, since it's a story based on King Arthur, we can see several aspects like the Holy Grail, the Excalibur, and other aspects that can be mainly portrayed for King Arthur. But since it's a story based on the legendary king of all England, and also how he achieved to succeed in the England of his era, we can also address those aspects in this story. Also, there is alliteration and poetic structure. The poem is written in an alliterative verse, a style typical of Middle English literature. This is something that we will see in the next section. And also, another key aspect that we can see here is the wild versus civilization, because on this story, the figure of the Green Knight stands in contrast to the civilized world of King Arthur's court, since he has a color green that is noticeable to be referred to nature, or also to a wild aura, something that is not seen commonly with the civilized world where King Arthur and his knights live. Now we will see one of the passages that can be found in the first part of this story. This part is called the challenge, and it goes by this. Then the Green Knight, with a grim grin, spoke aloud in a voice like thunder. Here I am, who seeks to be struck, a blow to be given, and to be taken. But I request one thing of you, noble knights. One condition to be agreed upon is I ask that you give me a blow with your axe, and I shall return it as you will see, 1 year from now in this very place. Now this passage is called Gawain's acceptance. I will take your challenge, said Gawain, for I am the youngest and the least of these knights, and therefore I will serve as your substitute in this matter. So let me be the one to strike the blow. This passage can express the idea that Gawain has to portray always a brave act or also a brave gesture about all odds that can be presented within his life. On this example, Gawain wants to express that he is brave, although he is not one of the, let's say, best seasoned knights that the Round Table has. He wants to take this opportunity to show that he can be quite useful for his party. This passage is called the challenge accepted. When the Green Knight saw his chance, he brandished his axe and spoke with a bold voice. If you are so bold and as brave as you say, then you shall strike me now and see if you can take the return blow. For I will keep my word and give you your return in a year and a day at the Green Chapel. That is fair challenge, said Sir Gawain, and I will take it upon myself. I will strike the blow with my own hand, and I will keep my word to you. Let us not delay, but make it ready now. This passage can we see the contrast between the idea that Sir Gawain wants to express with his actions and how he can be brave enough to accept his fate about having to accept the return blow from the Green Knight. On this following section, we're going to talk about the symbolism that we can find within Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and how these have caused a notorious relevancy within the years to come. The first one is the seasons. This can be represented as a cycle of life or passage of time, since this story happens in a whole year. We can tend to see this as a way to as a resourceful way to see how Sir Gawain, the protagonist, interact, have different adventures, and also learns a lot about this experience that he is encountering. Also, we have the castle of Lady Bertilac. On the history, we can see that in order for Sir Gawain to find the Green Chapel, when he is going to find the Green Knight, after a year of having beheading his head, um, he finds a castle where there lives Lord and Lady Bertilac. The thing is that Sir Gawain starts to fall in love with Lady Bertilac and have some emotions towards her that can be represented as a temptation or the sin of, um, let's say, tasting or having something that is not yours, that does not correspond to you. That can be a huge sin, especially we're talking about uh, um, expressing the night code or the moral code. Also, one of the aspects that we can see in here is the material wealth versus spiritual values. This is because Sir Gawain expresses that he wants to have a life that cannot be considered quite luxury or quite extravagant. He only wants to be remembered with his ideals and also by being a brave man, although deep inside he is drowning in fear. This is a contrast between the material world that can be found in the surroundings of the castle and the interiors with the spiritual values that Sir Gawain has. Also, with this, we have the Green Knight symbolism. As we have discussed earlier, he has a natural aura, or also he uses supernatural elements. It is quite considered that the green color back in the day was a color referred to Satan or to heretic or paganism ideas. So, for that reason, this character within this story can be also interpreted or considered a diabolical individual or someone referred to the devil. Also, we have the green girdle or belt. This is an element that Lady Bertilac gives to Sir Gawain in order to protect him from no harm. So this can show the human frailty and self-preservation that Sir Gawain has, because although he's a knight, he knows that he's a human and that he can bleed and can get hurt. So he wants to avoid that, but feeling secure by feeling safe that he's going to be all right. Also, we have the Knight Code, that is a way to represent the ideals and morals that a knight should have about doing the right thing and not get interrupted by oddly or frustrated or sins that could commit in not having the opportunity to bright as a knight as he wanted to be. With that being said, the poem provides valuable insights into medieval society, including attitudes toward knighthood, nature, and the supernatural, as it also reflects the cultural values and concerns of the time, offering historians and scholars a window into the medieval mindset. Also, this poem is notable for its alliterative verse, a form that was prominent in Middle English literature, and also it can be used as a key example of medieval romance, since it helps to create a shape of combination of courtly love, adventure, and also the idea of the bravery and how a knight should be portrayed and should act. Now we're going to talk about one of the most innovative and also special books that helped to recreate what we know right now as Middle English and the differences that we can find with modern English. And this is the Canterbury Tales, published by Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer holds a pivotal place in the history of literature, and this is thanks to the creation of the Tales of Canterbury. The Canterbury Tales is a collection of stories narrated by a group of pilgrims traveling from London to Canterbury to visit the shrine of St. Thomas Becket. As they go to Canterbury, they find a tavern in which a host asks for the pilgrims to narrate the stories in order to make things more entertaining. Um, the host makes a competition within the pilgrims in which the best four stories that he's going to listen about all of the 24 pilgrims will have a free meal back on the way home to Canterbury. With that being said, since we're talking about several characters that are going to be included on this book, we can find a lot, and I mean a lot, of key elements in this section. The first one is the satire and irony. Since Chaucer employs satire and irony to highlight the discrepancies between appearance and reality, and this is because the pilgrims have several different backgrounds. They come from different parts of England, and they are also people that we could see quite normally back in the medieval English. We can find millers, we can find clerks, also summoners, there's also knights, even there is a widow. People that have normal lives, that they are not quite, let's say, the center of attention, like a king or like an emperor. They were people that you could find quite easily on this part of time. And the satire and irony is one of the most significantly aspects that prevailed and can be observed, studied, and appreciated in this book. Another aspect is the characterization. As I previously mentioned, each pilgrim is vividly drawn with distinct traits and backgrounds. Chaucer made a quite detailed job on showing how each character can be portrayed with his different, let's say, expressions regarding a word. As we're talking about English, or in this case, medieval English, there are a lot of different changes that can be found if we compare it with the modern English. And for that reason, Chaucer wanted to show how people back then, expressed their ways about talking with different people. And that is something that was done quite good, thanks to the effort and also to the patience of Chaucer within recreating these characters. There is also a notorious social critique about certain aspects that could be found in the medieval society. As for example, there is an inspection about how the church could be corrupted and also control the world with his false ideas. Also, how we can find aspects as um, independency about women, or also about unfaithful things. All of those aspects can be showed and well portrayed in this section. Chaucer wanted to satirize and also make social perspective about how things were occurring back in the medieval society, and how those aspects could be also studied, and let's say having that piece of historical value to be um, showed in the modern era, and how we can compare it to all of the things that are going on in our modern society. Also, there is a language and a style so special and so unique about Chaucer's work. And this is because he wrote it in Middle English, which was innovative for his time and made his work accessible to a wider audience. This is because, as I previously mentioned, um, thanks to the Norman conquest, it was quite odd to see a book or a poem written in English. Therefore, it was only accessible if you could read and also write in French or also in Latin. So, for this reason, we can give points to Chaucer for taking the high risk of creating a book in which Middle English was the main language in which we should read it and also express it. As we discussed the main plot of the history of the Canterbury Tales, um, is primarily based on that each tale is based on a character that he wants to show, let's say, a recall or a tale about his previous adventures or disadventures for that matter. On this case, since we are talking about 24 pilgrims, we're not going to mention all of them, but we are going to take a look about what we considered, let's say, the most important or the most significant characters that are in this book. One of them is the knight, or also the Knight's Tale. This story is about two knights that fight for the love or a lover, and this occasionally occurred or provoked that um, they have a rivalry that leads to a tournament to win her hand. Uh, as key points, we can note that this tale stands out for its novel ideas and elaborate depiction of courtly love and chivalry, something that maybe can be more linked to the previous book that we explained about the Green Knight. There's also a character that quite noticeable is one of the most important and significant of this book, and that is the wife of Beth. Her tale is quite special. It's about a woman who has been married with 5 times, and it's spoken about her views on marriage and female dominance. She also tells the story that involves a knight who must discover what women truly want in order to save his life. And ultimately, this knight learns that women desire sovereignty over their husbands. One of the main aspects that have been focused and also quite studied, even to this day, is that this tale can be quite controversial because of the ideas that want to implement, as we're talking about a character that explores the themes of female empowerment and gender roles. So maybe it can be an idea that was quite, let's say, um, earlier for the time where Chaucer was living at the moment, since the women were not considered to have a huge role on the changes about a society. Last but not least, we also want to talk about the Summoner's Tale. On his section, his tale is about a satire involving a corrupt summoner who visits a sick man. Um, the man tricks him by giving him a fort as his payment, since it can be considered an humorous and hilarious tale. We can also take a look about the key points since we're talking about a summoner that uses the word of the church to implement his power, although he is corrupt from the core. And this can lead to, let's say, a way to criticize how the church all wanted to have the idea that there was only a reason to be sick, and that's because of the heretic or also the expressions that we can learn from the Bible. And there was not such thing as science. So the only way to get healthy, to get better, was to conduct or to ask for a summoner or a clerk from the church to help you out. Now we want to take a look about one of the passages that we can find from the Knight's Tale. And as you can see, these can be quite odd comparing to the way that we are used to write and also read in English. As we can see, maybe we can have the idea that this is something related to gibberish or something that has not sense. However, since we're talking about Middle English, which is a predecessor of what we know right now as Modern English, there has been quite changes about how we read and how we write English. So I'm going to make this passage in the most clear and thorough way I can be possible to do. The knight. He had been also sometime knight, that loved chivalry, troth, and honour, freedom and courtesy. Full worthy was he, in her orders were, and thereto had it he written, no man fared, as well in Christendom and healthy, and ever honoured for his worthiness. The passage of the night can be used to express what we know as Middle English versus Modern English. As time goes by, there has been a constant change within the Middle English and the Modern English, and this is the vocabulary. As we can see in Middle English, there has been an amalgam of alliterations and constant phenomenons that have been changed drastically to sound more efficiently or more refreshed in terms of Middle English, where we can see archaic or ancient vocabularies. As for example, we have the word quainty, which means cunning or strange in the modern English. And of course, quainty can sound a little bit odd or off the time. So for that reason, there has been a modification in order to change this vocabulary for something that can be considered more acceptable on the basis of modern language. Also, we have the grammar section. Back in the day, the Middle English used to have a more extensive system of inflections. Inflections can be followed as endings to indicate tense, case, number, and gender. So, for the sake of making something more easy to implement, we opted to change these inflections or endings for something more easy to understand and also to remember. For that reason, we rely more on word order and auxiliary verbs to indicate grammatical relationships, instead of making a plethora of endings to indicate the previous cases. We also have the pronunciation. The pronunciation back in Middle English was different from Modern English, as we have seen with the passage of the night, with many sounds that have since disappeared or changed. For that reason, thanks to modern English, pronunciation has evolved to what we recognize today, with different vowel sounds and some consonant shifts that makes Middle English text sound quite different when we read aloud. Also, this was because since English was not written but only spoken, there was not, let's say, the perfect way or the ultimate way to talk in English. There was quite different ways to grade the same word because there was not a general rule. So this changed drastically with the modern English edition, where there was a general rule that all of us should follow, and it was more easily to remember. Finally, there is the expressions and usage. We want to point out another passage of the Canterbury Tales, in which contains a phrase that goes by "What an April with this short suit," where "shures" means showers and "suit" means sweet. This was changed with modern English with um, a huge change about the same passage that we have just mentioned. So this reflects how we have went to the point of making such changes in order to prevail a language that otherwise if it didn't have the same impact as Chaucer's work had, probably we wouldn't be talking about English, and probably English should never have the same um, results or the same outcomes that it has right now. As a conclusion, the main significance about Chaucer's work was quite popular and it should be implemented to be discussed. One of them is obviously that Chaucer is known as the father of English literature. This is because of his role in popularizing the use of the English language in literary works at a time when French and Latin were dominant in literary and scholarly circles. His choice to write in Middle English helped establish it as a legitimate language for literature. Also, with the implementation of the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer's most famous work, um, is something quite special because although his ultimate work, he was not able to finish it. Since we're talking about 24 pilgrims and four stories for each pilgrim, we will be talking about 116 histories as a whole, something that um, unfortunately Chaucer never managed to finish. So, despite all that, this is considered as one of the most narrative innovations about that time because of the frame narrative of having characters that tell their own stories within a larger and narrative framework. This introduced a storytelling technique that influenced later writers and helped to develop the modern novel as we know it today. Also, we can point out about the characters that we see in Chaucer's work are complex and multifaceted, representing various facets of medieval society through satire and humor. We critique the social norms, religious practices, and class structures, making his work a rich source for understanding medieval social dynamics. Finally, there is a huge cultural impact about Chaucer's influence, where he extends beyond literature into other art forms, since his work have inspired adaptations in theater, film, and art, demonstrating their enduring relevance and appeal.